Nate Diaz has surprised everyone by taking shots at Islam Makhachev, the current welterweight champion and pound-for-pound number fighter. Nate Diaz called Islam a boring fighter and also questioned his spot at number 1 pound-for-pound. From Diaz's perspective, Islam hasn't beaten anyone truly special, and his recent fights are so forgettable that they just come off as boring. He dismisses the idea that Islam's name should even be mentioned in the top pound-for-pound conversation.
In your opinion, who's the number 1 pound-for-pound fighter right now in the UFC?
Who's in the UFC right now? John for sure.
What about Islam?
They just throw that shit. They just throw shit out like that. He's been there for like 2 minutes and he ain't beat nobody that's great.
Oh.
And they think I'm fucking just hating, but I'm like, that's because we got our differences. But there's shit that I seen that I'll just remember forever. So when you get that shit like that and you got whatever Islam did, and it's like that don't even match. Like I ain't seen nothing from them motherfuckers that all. I can't even remember anything but getting bored in all them fools last fight. So that name shouldn't even been thrown at those guys. Yeah.
However, the fans believe that Islam Makhachev has proved himself time and time again, and his 10 years unbeaten record is the biggest proof of that. Georges St-Pierre also defends Islam Makhachev and called his performance absolutely brilliant. Georges St-Pierre watched the fight and was amazed, pointing out that Islam barely took any punches. He feels anyone who calls the fight boring doesn't understand the art of fighting. St-Pierre highlights how impressive it was for Islam to move up a weight class and defeat Jack Della Maddalena so dominantly.
Right now, I think the best pound for pound is probably Islam Makhachev. I mean, I was there, I witnessed his performance last Saturday. It was freaking brilliant. Unbelievable. I don't think he even took a punch. It's unbelievable.
It is crazy.
A lot of people there will be, oh yeah, it was a decision. These people who says that, I'm sorry, because they don't know the art of fighting. They have no idea. They don't understand the art of fighting. His performance was freaking amazing. You know, like yeah, the fight, you know, was not a flawless victory with a crazy submission or knockout, but the way he going up in a weight class and beat Jake Della Magdalena like he did is freaking hard.
Robert Whittaker even believes Islam Makhachev could defeat prime Georges St-Pierre. He thinks Islam would excel if the fight becomes a wrestling heavy scramble, using his strengths to dominate like Khamzat Chimaev would, while GSP relies more on a complete MMA skill set. Whittaker also notes that once Islam takes an opponent to the ground, it's extremely difficult for them to get back up.
I think Islam would get it done. I think.
All right.
Just because Islam, I think if the fight becomes a scramble off and a wrestle off, Islam's going to come out of it better, just because he's built for it. Just like Chimaev would do the same. Whereas GSP utilized the full toolbox of MMA, so he utilized his wrestling and his grappling to eventually stand back up, box your head off because you're worried about the takedown. Then he'll take you back down and do the same. Whereas he'll get you down and you ain't getting back up, sort of thing.
Yeah.
Robert Whittaker defends Islam Makhachev and even Khamzat Chimaev, describing their fights as masterclass grappling sessions. He notes that seeing them control opponents at a championship level for long periods is extremely rare in UFC history. Whittaker calls it wild and impressive, saying these fights could be studied like tutorials for high-level grappling, and he finds it fascinating to watch such precise skills in action.
I don't mind seeing that in a championship fight because you don't see that at championship fights. Like the ability to hold someone down at champion level, especially like the champion. If you go in there like Chimaev did, like Islam did, and hold the champion down for 20 odd minutes, for 23 odd minutes, that is so rare. You don't see that. UFC hasn't seen that really across its history. It is wild. It is wild. And honestly, it's also cool seeing the bubble. You know, we're in a bubble period and I'm waiting for it to pop. You know? And maybe it won't, but we'll see. And it is the highest level grappling. Like you can go back and watch those as a tutorial, bro. They're like, look at the small details. It's crazy.
Jack Della Maddalena's coach, Ben Vickers, praises Islam Makhachev for cementing his legacy as one of the greatest. He admits that even though his predictions didn't come true this time, Islam executed a perfect game plan, showing mastery in the octagon. Askren congratulates Islam for delivering such a dominant performance and solidifying his place as probably the GOAT.
I'd really like to praise Islam for his performance.
you can make yourself look an idiot when you come on podcasts and predict things and they don't happen. I believed in everything I said, and obviously it didn't come true this time. But for 10 years, pretty much everything I've said has come true. So I'm going to stand by what I say. And yeah, this time I got egg on my face and I look a bit silly for some of the things I've said. But at no point do I feel I was disrespectful towards the other side. I just said how I believe the fight would go down. And they put together a masterful game plan. And Islam executed that game plan to perfection. And I can give them nothing but props. And congratulations to him on cementing his legacy as probably the GOAT.
On the other hand, there are rumors about Islam fighting against Ilia Topuria, but the welterweight champ believes Ilia has found a contender. Islam Makhachev feels Armin's performance against Dan Hooker makes it clear he's ready for a title chance. He already expects Armin to win the fight, but the level of control and dominance surprises him. And in his view, that kind of display proves Armin has earned his opportunity to challenge for the belt.
Вчера Армен Сарукян одержал уверенную победу. Впечатлил ли тебя Армен?
Ну, я так и предполагал, что он выиграет, но не так доминирующий, думал, выиграет. Я думаю, Арман уже заявил, доказал, что он заслуживает титульный шанс и, наверное, будет драться за пояс в следующем.
Armin Tsarukyan is also confident he can dominate Ilia Topuria, using sharp elbows and overwhelm him on the way to a TKO finish. He believes his ground and pound and close-range strikes would be the key to breaking Ilia down and ending the fight before it reaches the later rounds.
Все видели, что ты сделал сейчас с Хукером, видели брутальный финиш с Дариушем из последнего. А ты вот мог бы в красках описать, как бы ты хотел завершить бой с Топурью?
Топурью я бы хотел забить локтями, просто изрезать все лицо и закончить ТКО.
Кстати, вот если говорить про лицо, ты видел Хукера лицо?
Да.
Сейчас вот сразу открыл, покажу.
Покажи. Жалко Хукера. Вот еще вот другой глаз еще так же сделать Топурью, вообще будет бомба.
However, Sean O'Malley believes the UFC is unlikely to book a fight between Ilia and Armin because they want to keep Ilia as champion for as long as possible. In his view, Armin is a real threat at 155 and has a strong chance of beating Ilia, which is exactly why he feels the promotion would rather avoid making that matchup happen.
Armin is no joke. Armin versus Ilia is an interesting matchup. I do not think the UFC will make Armin versus Ilia because I think they love Ilia as a champion. He's a great champion, and I don't think they really want Armin to become champion. He has a legitimate chance at beating Ilia. I can't believe I said it. I think Ilia might knock him out, but if anyone has a chance of beating Armin at Ilia at 155, it's Armin, the Turkey Mound, Tsarukyan.
Meanwhile, Dricus du Plessis wants to see a historic champion versus champion matchup between Islam Makhachev and Ilia Topuria. He feels Islam is nearly unstoppable in the octagon, but the fight he really hopes for is against Ilia, who's also a double champion. Du Plessis believes that such a fight can be skipped and should happen eventually.
I think 16 wins now. He's equaled Anderson Silva, one of the greatest of all time. Champ. Who stops him?
Yeah, I mean that is an incredible record. That's what I said when we talked about this fight. He's just so good. It almost feels like there's nothing he can't do. And when it comes to the fight, but the fight I would still want to see. I know he's at welterweight right now, but the fight I would love to see is him versus Ilia. I think that is the way to go. I think that's an amazing fight.
Yeah, Ilia's had a lot to say, hasn't he?
Yeah, absolutely. He's just full of confidence, and rightfully so. He's still the pound for pound #1 fighter. He's also a double champion. I don't think we cannot let that fight happen eventually.
Colby Covington also wants Ilia Topuria to be Islam Makhachev's next opponent and thinks he has a real chance to win. He believes Ilia would be Islam's toughest challenge, whether at lightweight or welterweight, noting that taking him down would be much harder. Covington also points out that Ilia is one of the hardest hitters in UFC history and says he would love to see him knock out Islam.
Speaking of Islam, who do you think is most deserving to fight him next?
You know, either Usman or Who else they got? I mean, I want to see the Topuria fight. Everybody wants to see the Topuria fight. I think it needs to happen. You know, whether they do it at welterweight or they do it at lightweight, that fight needs to happen. We need to settle it. And I think that Ilya will be a toughest fight because he has that low center of gravity, so he's a lot shorter. So it's going to be harder to take him down and hold him down. So he's got good jiu-jitsu. I see him getting back to the feet, and obviously he's one of the biggest punchers the UFC's ever seen. So I'd like to see Ilya get his hands on him and knock him out.
In another interview, Colby Covington demanded the same thing from Islam. First, he praised Islam Makhachev for winning the welterweight title, noting that he executed his game plan and dominated the fight. Covington also believes that a matchup with Ilia Topuria would be ideal and insists the fight should happen.
And speaking of UFC fights and speaking of patience, we just saw a new welterweight champion, Madison Square Garden, Jack Della Maddalena. He lost to Islam Makhachev. Did you see that coming?
No, I didn't see it coming. You know, I thought that he was the bigger guy and he'd be able to overpower Makhachev, but, you know, hats off to him, man. He implemented his game plan and, you know, was able to really just control the fight the whole time.
How do you see people beating him within the division?
Yeah, you're going to have to stuff his takedowns and, you know, make him work like Volkanovski did in that first fight. You know, he just, you know, stuffed the takedowns and brawl with him. So I think Topuria is the perfect fight for him. I think that fight needs to happen. Topuria has a low center of gravity, so he's going to be very hard to take down. And when he's not taking him down, he's going to be punching him with all he's got. So I'm hoping that the UFC makes that fight next.
On the other hand, Islam Makhachev makes it clear that a return to lightweight only happens if the offer is truly worth it. He explains that he's not as young as he once was, and every cut down to 155 takes a serious toll on his body. Dropping that much weight is no longer easy or healthy for him, so it would take something major to convince him to go through that process again.
Ислам, если UFC тебя попросят провести бой с Ильей Топурией в 70 килограмм, согласишься ли или теперь только 77?
В 70, я думаю, это должно быть слишком хорошее предложение, чтобы я опять начал вес гонять 70 килограмм, так как я уже не молодой тоже в этом виде спорта, и каждая весогонка забирает тоже годы здоровья, и уже не так легко, как раньше вес гонять.
However, Demetrius Johnson, an MMA guru, talked about a welterweight clash between Islam Makhachev and Ilia Topuria, raising questions about whether Topuria and others in the division can match Makhachev's size and skill. They highlighted that Makhachev's main strength lies in his ground control rather than striking, and even experienced fighters struggle under the pressure he applies. While doubts remain about Topuria's ability, facing Makhachev would bring a unique challenge and mental test.
Should Ilia Topuria and Michael Morales be in the same weight class?
Ilia Topuria taking on Islam Makhachev. Is it at 155 or is it at 170?
It's unfair at 170. At no point in UFC history should Ilia Topuria and Michael Morales be in the same weight class. The difference would be too much. With Makhachev, it's not limbs, it's the back. When he's on top, you can see his back. Or maybe Ilia could listen. Doubting Ilia has become like a loser's profession, and maybe he'll get in Makhachev's head a little bit as well. JDM was kind of just sort of staying calm in the build-up. You know, someone will ask him a long-winded question and he'll go, "Yeah, we'll see," and that's it.
Islam Makhachev further opens up about his move to welterweight and admits he wishes he had done it earlier. He explains that at the start of his career, he's only dreaming about breaking into the top 10 and eventually winning the belt. Once he reaches the top, he realizes he can afford to move up in weight. In his most recent fight, he feels he's not smaller than his opponent and is finally on equal terms physically. Looking back, he regrets spending so many years forcing brutal weight cuts instead of making the transition earlier.
Скажи, каково это быть чемпионом, двойным чемпионом, насколько это была желанная для тебя цель? Вообще, видел ли ты себя в начале карьеры в UFC, что ты именно вот на второй пояс пойдешь?
Нет, конечно, если. Только когда в начале карьеры я пришел, просто мечтал в топ-15 попасть, мечтал с лучшими драться. Потом потихоньку уже как попал в топ-15, в топ-10, пояс завоевал. И потом уже по весу я чувствовал, что я могу весовую категорию подняться, поднять вес правильно. И всегда думал, буду себя там комфортно чувствовать, что не придется столько веса гонять. И так и получилось в последнем бою. Я не меньше соперника был в таких же физических кондициях, были на равных, все условия были равны, и даже немного было сожалений, что почему я раньше не поднялся в весовую категорию, а столько времени гонял, столько веса.
Islam Makhachev also feels a decision on his next opponent at 170 is coming soon. With 3 or 4 strong contenders in the mix right now, he expects the picture to become clear within the next couple of weeks as the UFC chooses who will step up as the next challenger.
А кого ты видишь самым опасным соперником в том среднем весе?
самым опасным. Ну вот на моем турнире дрались двое ребят, оба выиграли бои досрочно, оба молодые, хорошо заканчивают бои. Но у нас сейчас дивизион, я думаю, самый активный, самый молодой, где самые такие конкурентные бои. Я думаю, UFC в ближайшее время определит. И вчера был хороший бой. Бывший чемпион дрался с молодым парнем. И я думаю, у нас сейчас есть минимум 3-4 претендента. И в ближайшее время, наверное, уже недели-две будет ясно, кто будет следующим претендентом.
In the welterweight division, Ian Machado Gary is continuously calling out Islam Makhachev, emphasizing that historic MMA rivalry between their countries as he calls out Islam Makhachev. He points out that Islam is guided by Khabib Nurmagomedov while he is the protege of Conor McGregor, and he wants a fight to settle the score for the welterweight world title.
I've beaten #1 in the world. I am the best in this division. We have history. Our countries have history in the game. The biggest rivalry in the sport. You're Khabib's protege. I'm McGregor's protege. Let's run it back for that welterweight world title. And Islam, the ball is in your court. You choose when, you choose where, and I'll be there. But I'm telling you now, that belt ain't coming home with you.
Islam Makhachev is not surprised by Ian Gary's performance against Bilal and feels it went just as expected. In his view, only a performance that truly stood out would put Gary in line for a title shot. He also points out that Shafkat has been inactive for over a year, and he doesn't believe a contender should sit out for that long and still walk straight into a title fight. Although, if Shafkat recovers and the UFC chooses him, he is open to it.
Вчера после победы Иан Гэри, тебе интересен этот соперник, он вызвал тебя на бой, на поединок, особенно с учетом того, что получится новая веха противостояния Дагестана с Ирландией.
Да, было бы интересно. Тоже хороший боец, на хорошей победной серии и молодой. Думаю, получится интересно. Ну, посмотрим, как он меня вчера не удивил. Если он удивил UFC, то, наверное, он будет следующим. Больше года не дрался. Претендент не может год отстаивать с травмами и прийти и драться за пояс. Да, мы поздоровались, он меня поздравил, пожали просто руку. Ну, если он восстановится и UFC решит, что он следующий, почему бы и нет?
Ian Gary acknowledges his respect for Islam Makhachev as the #1 pound-for-pound fighter and current champion, but sees him as the final obstacle to his own goals. He considers it personal once Islam moves into his division and is confident he can beat him and claim the belt. Gary insists Islam must face him next, arguing that no one else has faced such a deep and challenging level of competition across the division like he has.
Firstly, I want to say that I have nothing but respect for Islam Makhachev. Nothing. The guy's the pound-for-pound #1 in the world and the champion of my division. However, when you come into my division and you are the only thing that stops me, that is in the way of me achieving my dreams, I'm going to make sure that I punch a hole in your head. He has to fight me next. There is nobody that has fought a deeper division.
So, that's all we have from today's video, and hopefully you enjoyed it. Share your thoughts on this fight in the comment section, and don't forget to like and subscribe to our channel for more interesting videos.